Welcome to this beginner's perspective tutorial. I will show you how to complete the level slider tutorial. In the level slider tutorial, you will be asked to set up this level slider so that the LEDs light up depending on the position of the slider, like so. Okay, we're currently in the finished scene provided with the tutorial, but let's head over to the exercise scene. So here you will find all the game objects you need for this tutorial, as well as the description on how to complete this tutorial. And for this tutorial, we will need to create a kinematics controller, then add a slide switch to the slider object, then create a spline for the prismatic joint, which is generated as part of this slide switch. Then add an indicator light to all three LEDs, and then make sure the LEDs light up properly when the slide switch changes states. Okay, so let's begin with the first step. To create a kinematics controller, you can find how to do that in the description on the kinematics controller. Have nothing selected and then go to mechanics, add kinematics and then kinematics controller. Let's drag in the level slider on the kinematics controller to parent it underneath the kinematics controller to make sure the kinematics controller manages all kinematics on the level slider. Okay, that's the first step completed. Then add a slide switch to the slider object. So go to the slider object, and for the slide switch you can find here how to add and set up the slide switch. Go to slider, standard components, slide switch, and add the physical component. This will add the slide switch component to the slider as well as a prismatic joint. We're going to set up the prismatic joint first so that this slider object is only allowed to move through the slot of the level slider. A prismatic joint always needs a spline, so let's create a new spline, have nothing selected, and then go to utilities, create, and then a spline. This will add a new spline to the scene. I'm going to zoom out since the spline is of length 1 by default. I'm going to bring in this point so that it matches the length of the slot more closely. And then I'm going to parent this spline underneath the same parent as the prismatic joint, and that's over here. I'm going to rename this spline to slider spline. Okay. And then I'm going to rotate it so that it matches the path of the sloth. And that is, I believe, like so. Yes. Okay. Then let's reposition this. So, and that makes it like so approximately. Yes. Okay. And let's bring this point to in even more, like so. Okay, great. So that's the spline in the proper position now. Then we need to assign the spline to the prismatic joint. So we go to the prismatic joint on the slider object, and then in here we drag the spline, and that's now assigned to this prismatic joint. If we now enable enforce outside play mode, this should now be constrained to the spline, as you can see here. Right, so that works as intended. Great. Okay, so we have added the slide switch and created the spline for the prismatic joint. Okay, then add indicator lights to all three LEDs. These three LEDs should all light up depending on the position of this slider, and we're going to create indicator lights on these. In this description you can find how to do that. So you select a LED and then go to standard components, indicator light, add physical component. And we're going to do that for all three of these, like so. Okay, and then we can test if these work by going to the control panel tab in the indicator light, generate a control panel, and then click enable, disable, and that seems to be working. And I'm going to assume all three of these then work for now. So that's the LEDs set up. And then the last thing we need to do is make sure the LEDs light up properly when the slide switch changes states. That means that we need to set the states for the slide switch. Currently there are no states. there are 4 states in this slide switch. That's the off state, which is in now, the state where only 1 is turned on, 2 are turned on, and 3 LEDs are turned on. So let's position this slider on the states. So this is the off state at the very bottom limit, and then I'm going to click add state, and this will add a new switch state to the slide switch. I'm going to rename this off state. The position is 0, the upper weight we're going to leave as is for now, and it has 2 events which fire whenever the the state is selected and whenever it's no longer selected. But we're going to add all these states in first, so I'm going to reposition the slider to here. That's approximately where this LED should be selected, and add new state. I'm going to call this LED 1 state. Then add another state, that's this one, and this is then LED 2 state. And then the last state is the LED 3 state. Okay. The slide switch now draws a gizmo. The larger dots indicate the switch state's positions. The smaller dots are the transition points where the switch switches from one state to another. Let's add turning on and off the LEDs first. So let's drag this back, because if we go to play mode now, and that's the only way the switches work, if we drag this, none of the LEDs work. In live data we can see that the switch states change. We go from off state to 1 to 2, as you can see here, to 3. All right, okay, so that works, but we need to turn on and off LEDs as soon as they are selected. So we want LED 1 to turn on as soon as switch state LED 1 is selected. Then open up the inspector for the LED 1 switch state, and on the unselected event add another action by clicking this plus sign. Then it asks for you to assign a game object, and that's going to be LED 1. And on LED 1 there is the indicator light component, and we're going to trigger the set active method here, and we're going to set active to true, which means that as soon as this state is selected, LED 1's indicator light is set to active. So let's test that. Let's go to play mode, and if we now drag this slider onto state 1, as you can see, the LED now turns on. If we, however, go back to the off state, this doesn't turn off because we haven't told the script to turn the LED back off again. And we do this by going to the event for the off state, because as soon as the off state is selected, LED 1 should turn off. So we add this another action to the unselected event for the off state, and also here we drag in LED 1, and then we go to the indicator light and we say set active, and we leave this unchecked, which set it set active to false. So if we now go to play mode, if we drag the slider over to state 1, the LED turns on, and if we go back to the off state, it turns off, as you can see. Now we're going to want to do this for all the LEDs. Okay, so I'm going to back to edit mode, and then do the same thing for LED 2. So if LED 2 is selected, let's add LED 2 to this, and then the indicator light set active to true. And of course, if LED 1 gets selected, it should turn off. So we add another action to this event, and then drag LED 2 in here, and for the indicator light set active to false. Okay, we can close these. And for the last LED 3, if LED 3 is selected, we want to add LED 3 and have the indicator light set active to be true. And then if LED 2 gets selected again, add another action here. LED 3, its indicator light should have set active to be false. So let's fold these all open, and it should now look like this. Off state sets LED 1 to not active, set active to false. LED1 sets LED1's indicator light to set active true, and LED2 indicator light set active to false. 2 does the same but for LED2 and 3, so LED2 is set to true, LED3 is set to false, and then lastly LED3 sets LED3's indicator light to true. If we go to play mode, now everything should work. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Alright, great. So all the LEDs work, as you can see. There's only one thing remaining. As you can see, it already turns on here, and we don't want that. We want it to turn on approximately here. Alright, so I'm going back to edit mode, and what we now do is we're going to play around with the weights of the switch states. And starting with LED 1 state here, it has a lower weight and an upper weight, and these weights manage where the transition point lies. The higher the value of the weight, the further this point lies from the actual position of the switch state. If I change this value here, you can see I'm going to increase the value, and the transition point moves away from the position of this state, but I'm going to set this to 0, which means that the position of the state is actually the transition point of the state. So if I go to play mode and I now slide this slider in, you will see that if I position this exactly on here, only then the light turns on, right? And we're going to do that for all three LEDs. For all three switch states. So on 2, the lower weight is also 0. And then for 3, the lower weight is also 0. And as you can see, you can't see the transition points anymore because they are overshadowed by these larger dots. But they are there. So if I go once again to play mode and I now slide the slider up, you can now see that the LEDs turn on exactly when you want them to. And that's all there is to it, to the level slider tutorial. If you have made it this far, you have actually completed the tutorial. I hope you've learned something from it. If you would like to try the tutorial for yourself, you can find the download for the tutorials in the documentation.